Hello, everybody, and welcome to another Sunday School Review. We appreciate you taking the time out to listen in on what we believe the Word of God has to say to all of us today through Sunday School. The Word is very powerful. The Word can reach places that we don't think the Word is reaching, but it can. And today it's going to deal with this prophetess, Deborah, the dutiful judge. Coming from Judges chapter 4, verses 4 through 10, then drops down to verse 14, then verses 21 through 22. Very, very powerful lesson. Let's get right on into it here today. And Deborah, a prophetess, the wife of Lipidoth, she judged Israel at that time. And she dwelt under the palm tree of Deborah between Ramah and Bethel in the Mount Ephron. And the children of Israel came up to her for judgment. And she sent and called Barak, the son of Abinoam, out of Kadesh Naphtali, and said unto him, Had not the Lord God of Israel commanded, saying, Go and dwell toward Mount Tabor, and take with thee 10,000 men of the children of Naphtali and of the children of Zebulun? And I will draw unto thee to the river of Kishon Sisera, the captain of Jabin's army, with his chariots and his multitude, and I will deliver him into thine hand. And Barak said unto her, If thou would go with me, then I will go. But if thou would not go with me, then I will not go. And she said, I will surely go with thee, notwithstanding the journey that thou takest shall not be for thine honor. For the Lord shall sell Sisera into the hand of a woman. And Deborah arose and went with Barak to Kadesh. And Barak called Zebulun and Naphtali to Kadesh, and he went up with 10,000 men at his feet, and Deborah went up with him. And Deborah said unto Barak, Up, for this is the day in which the Lord had delivered Sisera into thine hand. Is not the Lord gone out before thee? So Barak went down from Mount Tabor, and 10,000 men after him. Then Jael, Heber's wife, took a nail of the tent, and took a hammer in her hand, and went softly unto him, and smote the nail into his temple, and fastened it unto the ground. For he was fast asleep and weary, so he died. And behold, as Barak pursued Sisera, Jael came out to meet him, and said unto him, Come, and I will show thee the man whom thou seekest. And when he came into her tent, behold, Sisera lay dead, and the nail was in his temple. In your Sunday school book, there's a very beautiful picture. How might God use your influence? How might God use your influence? This is a very good lesson, and it has a lot of material, and I'm not going to be able to cover it all, most definitely, so I'm going to do an outline as much as we can to cover as much as we can in the Word of God, because it is jam-packed with information, education, inspiration, and everything else that goes along with it. So let's get right on into it here. Let's go to work and bring this out as much as we can. Part one of our lesson is Deborah's plan, and we see the setting in verses 4 and verse 5. Verse 4 introduces Deborah, the fourth and only female judge in Israel. And as a prophetess, she delivered God's message, and as a judge, she settled disputes for her people, for the Israelites, and who sought her out for wisdom. Then we see the core roles and the context of this great woman. She was a prophetess and a leader. So she communicated then directly with God and was recognized as a spiritual leader, not just a good person. She was recognized as a spiritual leader. Then we see the word judge. Israelites traveled to see her for her legal and her spiritual guidance. And it was gathered, and she typically gathered on a place called the Palm of Deborah, under a tree. And they saw her as a very serious person that was connected to God. Then the setting, her leadership took place after the Israelites had been oppressed for 20 years by Jabin, which is the king of Canaan, or the Canaanites. Then we'll see the spiritual significance here. She had what's called a fiery and a steadfast spirit. Her husband's name was Lipidoth, Lapidoth, like Roth Doth, Lipidoth, and it means torches. And it helped guide the people of Israel. This attitude that she had, this fiery spirit that she had, helped guide them out of Canaanite oppression. Then we see also administrative authority. She acted as a national, they call it arbiter, making binding judgments and resolving community conflict. We talked about Christian community in a previous lesson. Well, she was the one that helped to resolve Christian conflicts. We also see her, she was a military strategist. She later then summoned, this woman here summoned another general, military man, Barak. Some call him Barak, Barak or Barak. It's not Barack and Barack Obama. That spelling is that's ACK. It's a C in there, but this is Barak, but it's pronounced also in North America as Barak here. I want you to go get 10,000 troops and go to Mount Tabor. I want you to go there and defeat Sisera, this general of Jabin's army. The next thing we will see here, then, trust in God. And she made her decisions based strictly on the commands of God, and famously insisting on accompanying Barak into battle, because he asked her, won't you come and go along with me? And we'll get into that a little bit later. In the fifth verse, we see Judges 4 and 5 describes the headquarters of Deborah. What did she give all of her advice? She served as a national leader. She also settled legal disputes. She answered religious questions for those of her people under a specific palm tree in the hill country of Ephraim. That was kind of unusual, but God uses people in an unusual way because he's God. He can do what he wants to do. So what is the contextual breakdown here? We see the figure. The figure is Deborah, and she was a God-empowered civil and military leader, as well as a prophetess. And people traveled in to see her from, as I mentioned, from all over Israel to resolve their conflict and to seek divine wisdom. So she was one that could handle conflict resolution. You know, right now in the church, it's amazing that sometimes in the church people get into conflicts and no one is there to resolve the conflict. And the conflict can grow and grow and grow and gets worse and worse and worse, and it just gets out of hand. Anybody, well, not anybody, somebody got to have somewhat wisdom. Then we'll see the location. Her court was held under the shade of a palm tree, situated between the cities of Ramah and Bethel in the mountain of Ephraim. And this is a central elevated region located just north of Jerusalem. So what is the significance here? Her leadership was a major stabilizing force for Israel during the Canaanite oppression led by King Jabin and his general Sisera. And then later she summoned the military leader Barak to help liberate the entire nation. She summoned him. He didn't summon her. This was a very powerful lady we're talking about here today. We just skimming on the surface here this afternoon for this class today. So what was the task? We see this in verses 6 and 7. In Judges 4, 6, and 7, there's a famous theologian, Matthew Henry, which I like to read some of his material. And he highlights that God's command for Barak to raise up an army and then engage Sisera's forces. Then he frames Deborah as the voice of divine authority and emphasizes that God himself is going to orchestrate this entire battle, promising to lure Sisera, General Sisera, to the Kishon River. And that was going to secure Israel's ultimate deliverance. So God's hand was in this whole situation, like God's hand is in all of our lives. If we learn to lean on Jesus. So here's some key points then from Matthew Henry's commentary. Divine commission. Deborah then talks about God's specific instructions to Barak. I want you to gather 10,000 men from Zebulun and Naphtali, not from any other cities, from these two. I want you to march to Mount Tabor, and God promises to draw General Sisera and his intimidating iron chariots to the Kishon River to deliver them into Israel's hand. Now, this didn't look good. It didn't look good, didn't sound good, but it was God. So when God says something and give direction, it may not look good, but it's God. Just follow God's direction. So now we see the authority then of the prophetess. Deborah speaks not as a military commander. She speaks as a prophetess of God, bringing God's word, what thus said the Lord. So Henry then goes on to talk about how she operates as God's mouthpiece, issuing orders not from man, from divine authority. And so then we see the supremacy of God's power by drawing Sisera, this general, to a vulnerable location like a river. God then ensures that the victory will be attributed to God, to him, God himself, and not by military or not by any kind of strategic brilliance. This is going to be God. You see, we got to be careful on trying to take the glory. Boy, that's a whole nother lesson. Boy, you know what I can do, don't you? Boy, I'm something else. Look here. Look here. I'm something else. You ain't. Anyway, so verse 89, we see the prophecy. And I'm going to just read something. Barak said, if thou would go with me, then I will go. If thou would go with me, then I would go. So what we see here then is conditional obedience. Anybody guilty? Conditional obedience. So historical and theological commentators often break down Barak's reply in a few key ways, few key things. Number one is respect versus hesitation. It highlights then a complex mix of deep respect for God and God's given leadership, and also human hesitation when faced with an overwhelming military threat. Like this guy, General Sisera, that had 900 iron chariots. Boy, that's a big, at that time, that's a big, huge advantage. Okay? And so then we see confirmation in of God's words. Some scholars note that Barak wanted God's prophetic voice to be physically present on the battlefield. Why? To ensure divine favor and also to motivate the Israelite troops. We got God's spokesperson out here on the field with us, and God ain't gonna let nothing happen to her, so ain't nothing gonna happen to us. I mean, just so many things. So, and we also see shared leadership. The narrative then goes on to showcase how God can work in a whole lot of different ways with a whole lot of different individuals to accomplish what he wants to accomplish, his purpose. God is not limited. In the 9th verse, we see in Judges 4:9, it captures a moment that the prophetess Deborah agrees to go with them into battle. But because Barak required her presence, instead of relying and trusting on the Lord, she prophesied something, that he would then go on to forfeit the ultimate military glory to a woman. Y'all hang with me. We're going to see what this woman and how simple this glory went to this woman for what she did with simple tools. Now we'll see the prophecy, the end of the prophecy. The battlefield. Barak went on to gather 10,000 warriors, and they marched to Mount Tabor. And the Lord through the Canaanite commander Sisera, and his forces threw them into a panic. They didn't know what to do. And this allowed Barak and his army to defeat them. Now we see Sisera's escape. So this guy then fled on foot from the battlefield. And he sought refuge then in the tent of Jael, the wife of Heber the Kenite, assuming that his master's ally, that was an ally, was going to protect him from his enemies. But boy, wasn't he wrong. And now we see the hand of a woman. So instead then of offering him sanctuary, Jael, this woman, deceived Sisera by letting him come on in, get some rest. Somebody said they gave him a glass of milk. And boy, he was tired. And while he slept in, she drove the tent peg through his temple and into the ground. And then thus Deborah's prophecy came to pass. The military glory went to a woman and not to Barak, an unlikely candidate. And we're going to look at that again in a minute. So Henry then breaks down Judges 4 and 10 into several key insights regarding faith, regarding obedience, and the nature of Israel's victory. First of all, number one, ready and cheerful army. So this was rapid recruitment. You didn't have time to go through a whole lot of vetting processes and all this. It was quick. So Henry then notes that Barak, in a real quick order, raised his quota of 10,000 volunteers from Zebulun and from Naphtali. Then we see the word here in our commentary in this lesson, cheerfulness. Having these men, as the word said, at his feet indicates that there's total willingness and readiness to follow Barak to wherever he was going to lead them. Now we can't overlook those words. In churches, we overlook those words too much. We see the willingness, but not the readiness. So we're putting folks in position because they're willing, but they ain't ready. Y'all don't hear what I'm saying, right? And so now they got, well, I think my point is made there because I can go all, so then the next point, divine obedience. Matthew Henry then goes on to link the phrase at his feet to Isaiah chapter 41 and verse 2, which signifies being called into absolute obedience to God's command. That's a call, where there's no hesitation. There's absolute obedience to what God called them to do. Point number two is the disproportion of strength. So entirely on foot. These are footmen. So here he goes on to point out that at his feet underscores in Israel's army consisted completely or entirely on infantry. Infantrymen are men that fought on feet. They didn't have no horses, no buggies, no chariots. They was marching soldiers on feet. Boy, they was at a great disadvantage, but not with God. So they had no horses. So the Jews then did not have these horses. They didn't have these iron chariots, this kind of technology that they had at that time that the enemies just commanded and had in a great number. So God then balances the scales. You see, one man with God is a majority, even though he comes against a whole huge army, a large nation, a real influential voice. But with God, me and God is the majority. You and God is the majority, not the minority. So God then balances the scales. So this military disadvantage was completely then offset by the presence of God and God's spokesperson, Deborah, the prophetess. So then what's the role of Deborah? Let's kind of reemphasize that again. Making the force effective. While the 10,000 men were ready, not just willing, but ready, it was the presence of Deborah walking with them in the battle that made the army truly effective because they had God and they had God's mouthpiece right there with them. So we see then an inspiring presence. Her presence gave the soldiers the confidence. Her presence gave the soldiers the reassurance that God was actively going before them into battle. And the same thing for us today, class. God goes before us into our situations. We just got to trust him and believe him. Trust him and obey that he'll always, always make a way. In verse 14, we see the action. Here we see Deborah commands Barak to go out there and attack. She reassured him that God is marching ahead of you to ensure his victory over this General Sisera and his 900 iron chariots. So what is the context then and the meaning here? It's the call to action. Deborah the word up, told him up. Boy, look at him. And that is a directive in Hebrew, which means to immediately advance. Don't waste no time. And despite having a defensive high ground on Mount Tabor, Barak takes an offensive leap of faith by marching his forces down to engage the enemy. Almost like just to go start the fight. Just go down there and start it. And you see these guys got these chariots, but you go start the fight. One man with God is a majority. That's a big deal. And so we see here then divine precedence. And so a question is, she asked Barak a question. I guess he was hee-hawing around there. So he said, is not the Lord gone out before thee? That's what she asked him. Is not the Lord gone out before thee? And then this reminds Barak and the army of Israel that God is fighting on their behalf. And the battle has been won. The battle is over, and the victory is already won. All y'all doing now, Barak, is going through the motions. But get up. Quit procrastinating and hesitating and deliberating and contemplating. Get up and be about the business of God's business, because God has already assured you that the victory the song said, victory shall be mine. If I hold my peace, let God fight the battle. Victory shall be mine. Now we see the army here. Barak leads an infantry of 10,000 men drawn from the tribes of Zebulun and Naphtali. He leads them and draws them into battle that they are seemingly destined to lose on a flat, chariot-friendly terrain. Why am I going on the offense? I got a great defensive position here, and I'm going down here on the offense. I'm trying to start a fight in their territory where they can move around real good. What am I doing? I'm following God's command. That's what I'm doing. Part 2 of our lesson is Judges 4:21 through 22. Verse 21 illustrates how God can bring down the mighty using the most seemingly weak instruments. We're going to come back to that in a moment. So here are the key points here. The irony of weapons. General Sisera prided himself on his real big old army and these iron chariots that he had, this technology back in that day. But the commentator, the theologian, knows that he knows that the poetic justice of his defeat. The poetic justice of his defeat. You know what poetic justice is, right? Poetic justice is when the pockets get picked. Poetic justice. And so then the thought that to destroy Israel, that's what he thought, General Sisera, I'm going to destroy Israel with all my many iron chariots, when he himself was destroyed by one iron nail into his temple that went into the ground. Isn't that a great irony right there? All these iron chariots that he said he gonna go out there and take care of business. He gonna whoop them all up and down the field. and one nail took him out by one woman. And so then we see the weak confounding the mighty. So Henry highlights something. He highlights that the divine method of deliverance, God chose to complete the victory through the hand of a woman. And Jael, this lady called Jael, used everyday tools that she was highly familiar with as a tent maker and a tent dweller, a hammer and a tent stake, and she got the job done. Ain't that something? See, with God, that's why I'm telling you, when you got God on your side, we have a major advantage over people that's got all kind of advanced training. Ain't that something? Well, when you got God on your side, people can have all kind of intimidating training, and you can still win the battle and still win the day. So then we see here a change of heart. Henry goes on to suggest that while Jael may have originally shown hospitality to General Sierra, but there was a divine impulse, and it moved her to recognize this guy right here is an enemy of the Lord and an enemy of the Lord's people. God gives all of us instinct, intuition, and I think women have that on a heightened level, instinct and intuition. God give you so many gifts, and it's important to let the Lord use you there. So what's the reality of justice here? The commentator or the theologian uses this moment to remark on the broader scope of history. He observed that if Israel had did what they're supposed to do way back in before then, which was destroy the Canaanites, as God told them to do, they could have prevented and avoided a whole lot of this misery and a whole lot of this stuff they're dealing with right now. And he concludes with this adage. Listen to this adage here. Better to be wise late and purchase wisdom by experience than never be wise. Better to be wise late and purchase wisdom by experience than never wise. Then we see verse 22, and we got to bring this on to a close. Judges 4:22 captures the dramatic climax of the battle between the Israelites and the Canaanites. And it records the exact moment that Jael fulfilled the prophecy that was revealing the body, by revealing the body of the defeated Canaanite commander, General Sisera. And so we see now, let's look at some key contextual details here. Well, one is the prophecy. The prophetess Deborah previously told the Israelite army and the commander Barak that the glory for defeating Sisera would not go to him, but it's going to go to a woman, and that's exactly what happened. You see, a whole lot of folks say they prophesied, and my pastor, Bishop Nolan Torba, said they prophelied. You know what? I like to say something, Dan, but I ain't going to do it because I've been jumped over there into the flesh, so let me just keep it moving. Well, then we see the nail here, the nail. After getting away on foot from the battlefield, General Sisera sought refuge in Jael's tent. Repetition right here. She offered him hospitality, and some say a little warm glass of milk. She waited for him to fall asleep, and in his exhausted sleep, she drove a peg through his temple into the ground. What is the aftermath? By presenting the dead commander, this General Sisera, to Barak, Jael, this lady, the hand of a woman, demonstrated how God can use an ordinary tool. God can use a very unlikely person to secure ultimate victory. Sometimes you don't know where your blessing coming from, you know. And if you ain't careful, you'll turn your blessing away. Sometimes you don't know who the Lord's gonna speak to. If you ain't careful, you'll turn it away. God works in mysterious ways, wonders to perform. And then we should ask, Lord, please help me to hear your voice. Help me to know your voice. From my voice and my emotion and what I think. Help me to hear and to know your voice. Give me instinct. Give me intuition. Spiritual instinct, spiritual intuition, so I don't miss your best for me. And I realize that the battle don't belong to me. The battle belongs to God. Ain't that something? Hey, look, thank y'all for plugging into our class tonight, or today. Y'all have a great rest of the week. We'll see you again. The Lord say the same on our next Sunday School review. Y'all take care.